So one other thing that I found very interesting when I was reading your articles and the book was patenting for public good versus patenting for private goods, right? And it has an implication on how society, innovates, and and just because it is publicly available, you then innovate on top of it, right? So therefore, some of these economies or some of these countries which patented for public good, you see a massive movement in terms of the curve of innovation, right? And so is that very, very critical if you want the center of gravity to move? Patenting for, and America seems to be really patenting for private good, okay? And largely around saying, okay, let me, if you look at the amount of patents Google is buying, or, many of these companies are buying, it's almost like saying, let me own everything. And what I find is when you patent for public good, the amount of people who come in and develop on top of that public good is fairly large, and therefore innovation tends to move up. Is that something that you've seen in how nations get built and how empires get built?
I think there's a balance, right? So I think over the course of my career, I've kind of gone from being mildly anti-patent to being in the middle. And the reason for that is I think there are two things at play. One is information. You do need more information. You need information to be out there. So the origin of patents is about, well, back in the 16th, 17th century, a lot of invention is very tied up in particular people's expertise. And even today, it's very, very difficult to copy someone's invention without having the person who's worked on it, right? Even today, there's a reason that tech companies have non-compete clauses, right? So you fire someone or someone leaves, it's like, no, you're not allowed to work for our competitors for at least 5 to 10 years or whatever, right? There's a reason for that, which is that those people's skills are very valuable. It makes it much, much, much easier to copy technology if you yourself have worked on it. And it's a reason why one of the best ways to copy stuff is send people to go and work on it, bring them back, and then they'll know what to do. Right? It's all like you can send as many blueprints as you want, but it's going to still be very difficult to reverse engineer that. Or there'll be little hidden knacks or the kind of things that aren't shown on the plans. It hasn't been translated quite properly. There'll be, you work out ways of making these things work. So a big part of patents was about giving individuals a monopoly on a new invention so that they would come to the country. So it's early patents are almost like immigration visas, right? It's like you come to the country, you get the privilege on the new thing that you're bringing to the country. That way we've got you in the country and you're creating stuff for us and not for other people. And then often you have terms in the patent that say things like you need to train a few locals into how to do the thing that you've brought. Right? So there are conditions on these monopolies that you're giving them. And again, even just a temporary monopoly, but the very early ones, they're modeled on the Venetian patent system, which is about 10 years, so multiples of 10. But very quickly in Britain or in England, what you start to see is ones in multiples of 7. And 7 years is the duration of an apprenticeship. So if you have it that's one for 21 years, that means you're thought to be able to create 3 generations of apprentices who are going to know this stuff. And at the end of it, once they've passed that period, they're going to be able to take this industry further, and it's going to be rooted in the country, right? So if you die or you emigrate or you leave again, at least the industry will be able to stay and kind of creates that permanence. Later, in the 18th century, you start to see the growth of what we now call patent specifications, right? So as a condition for patenting, one of the things you have to do is you have to send in the blueprints. You have to say, this is how it's done. Give us a big description that people could reasonably copy, right? So by reading it, they should be able to kind of get someone who's relatively expert should be able to work out what you're doing and copy the thing. And that's, again, very important because what you're doing is you're incentivizing people to reveal information that they might otherwise have kept secret. What does that do? It creates a permanent base. Like, again, it's like data preservation, right? It's that if someone keeps their technology a secret, they die, it's gone. And there's loads of examples of that. So like 14th century China, the Ming Dynasty, there's a whole bunch of there's a kind of a particular technique in pottery that's just lost. Right, the guy dies.
Okay.
All of his apprentices presumably also either failed to learn, or they died, or they got distracted, did something else, and it's only rediscovered later. And the story is it's rediscovered because a guy had a dream in which the dead potter who the secret had died with appeared to him in a dream and explained how to do it. Like, that's the story, right? Make of that what you will. But that's a real worry, right? So you want to have a system in place where people are at least almost kind of, think of it this way: you could pay someone a prize, like the Society of Arts did, which is, one of the interesting things it did was pay people money to reveal their secret.
Correct.
But then you need to collect money. You need to get capital together to do that, to pay them for their secrets. Or you can say, I'll give you a monopoly. That's free in terms of getting the money up front for it, right? They may or may not fail. They may exploit the patent. They may not exploit the patent, but at least they write down the secret, right? So for basically doing it on the cheap, again, without having to front the money, you can get people to reveal their secrets. So I think there is a usefulness to patents in that respect. At least that's the way in which it's kind of evolved. And nowadays, a lot of it is about a patent can be kind of rendered invalid if it doesn't seem to be descriptive enough. That's also the way the case law in the late 18th century evolves as well. So I think you do need to have some kind of protection. In a way, it's a cheap way of doing these things. And the other aspect here, so one is about information. The second one, though, is about, I think there's an underlying principle in a lot of policy, which is that you get what you pay for. Yeah, you need to put some resources into something to get something out of it, right? Now, it's not necessarily the fact that if you put the money down, you're always going to get results. A lot of the time, you're going to pay for a dud. But if you're not paying for something, if you're not putting resources into something, you can't expect to get the outcome at all, right? Like, so if you never invest in pharmaceutical R&D, you're never going to get new drugs. You're just not going to do it. So you do need to have systems in place that at least allow for capital to be deployed to pursue particular R&D routes. And so, like, this is the really interesting thing about pharmaceuticals, right? People always talk about big pharma and like, oh, they spend billions and billions to create one tiny drug that barely changes things by 5% on some particular thing. And then it's super expensive for everybody to buy. And it's like, okay, well, part of the cost is from the way you've regulated it. But also, if you're going to do that, if you want to regulate it that way, you need to get the £1 billion. Like, you need to get that money to actually pay for any of it. And so you need some kind of system in place in which you get that. So I do think where the balance is not pro-patents, anti-patents. It's about how long are the durations of the patents. For how many years are you keeping things protected? How strong are the monopolies? I mean, you mentioned companies buying up lots of patents at once, so patent thickets, as I think they're often called. Like, yes, you maybe need to look at that and make sure people aren't just kind of chopping up lots of things and protecting it and kind of preventing change that way. But if what they're doing is they're revealing loads of information about what they're doing just by acting defensively, then that means the moment the patent expires, it's going to be great. We're going to have a whole load of stuff. So the counterfactual is if you're not going to use that system, you need some kind of alternative that pays for secrets to be revealed, that pays for information to be revealed. That could be prizes. It could be like the Society of Arts, where you pool subscription funds and they pay for these things. But it seems to work pretty well on the whole.
Okay.